Good afternoon, everybody. This is Yetti Esatu from Yetti Financial LLC and attorney Howard Haley from Advanced Life Goal. This is our weekly financial literacy in English version. I hope everybody's doing well today. And good afternoon, attorney Howard Haley.
Good afternoon, Yetti. How are you?
Good. I'm doing fine. Well, today we brought a comparison between Index Universal Life and 401k for our viewers. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. And
Sure. I read an article that, I came across an article that was from Time Magazine that dealt with why it was time to retire the 401k. So I figured I would use that as a part of the background for what we're talking about. And one of the things that the article brings up that it was time to retire the 401k. Now, this is an article from October of 2009. And one of the things that the article mentions was that, the ugly truth is the 401k is a lousy financial idea and that it's a financial flop and it's a rotten place to put our retirement reserves. And the reason that's the case is because it's almost like sleight of hand. I remember we spoke earlier this year about how people, when they started working, we were always drilled into us, put money in your 401k, put money in your 401k, put money in your 401k. But the higher people go in terms of their income earnings and their tax levels rise, the question becomes, are you going to be taxed more when you're in your 60s, the percentage of your income wise, than you are in your 20s or 30s when you first get a 401k? And so, I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not giving tax advice. I always tell everyone, be sure and check with your tax advisor or your accountant. But typically a 20-year-old who's making $10,000 to $15,000 a year is going to pay far less in tax than a 60-year-old who at the end of their career is making over $100,000 a year. So the tax income and tax base is really the question of, are you going to be making more later in life or less? And when you hit retirement age, when you start withdrawing your 401k monies, that's when the tax man says, pay me now or pay me later, but you're always going to pay. And so the first slide that you'll see here is the cover of the article, so that people who want to look and find this article, they can certainly find it from Time Magazine. And so I'm going to move to the next slide if I can. There are features of a 401k versus an index universal life policy that are very, very important to notice the difference. In the 401k, for example, there are market risks to your retirement. So let me start with there are 6 or 7 factors that you want to look at when determining which financial vehicle or where you want to put your money. They're all considerations you need to have. I don't care whether you put your money in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, money market accounts, IRAs, 401ks. These are all factors that you should consider and speak with your financial advisor about. One of them is, what is the market risk to your retirement? So if you look at a 401k, it is all 100% subject to the market. Even if you have it in, a safe space that's designed to give you market security, if you will, it's still at risk, and the market could tank and you could lose it all. I think good reference point is if you think about the people who had money in Enron stocks when Enron went down. Well, what happened to your money? Those people lost their entire fortunes, and it took years for some of them to recover. Likewise, with an index universal life policy, zero risk to your retirement, because if the market falls, although it's based on the market, it's not invested in the market. So even if the market falls, you're locked in and your money is secure. So you get all of the upside from the market, but none of the downside from market losses. 401ks, the next item is whether or not there's a death benefit. We talk about this all the time, and we've had multiple discussions about it. But, an index universal life policy is a life policy, so it has a death benefit. 401ks, they don't really have a death benefit. But if there's value in your 401k plan at the time of your demise, the plan is going to subtract taxes, any potential surrender charges because you didn't hit 59 and a half or 60 years old, and then your family gets the balance. So again, the tax man is saying, give me my share, whereas in a life policy, there is no tax. It's completely tax-free for the death benefit. What happens if you have a disability or an illness or some type of complication with your health? 401ks, people often draw from their 401k to pay their bills, but if you're not 59 and a half, you've got that tax penalty. The federal government and your state jurisdictions, depending on where you live, will require that you pay the taxable requirements plus the penalty for early withdrawal from that 401k before they'll distribute you your funds. So if you have a catastrophic illness and you need all of the money, whatever your tax bracket you're in, you're going to lose that plus 10%. With a index universal life policy, more often than not, they have living benefits. So that means for some of the plans, up to 90% is available for you to draw from for, whatever it is you want to use for. You're not limited or restricted to just paying the medical bills. Let's say you have a bucket list. You want to go do the things on your bucket list. Guess what? With an IUL, you can pull all the money that you want to pull out of that policy, some of the policy, none of the policy. You can collapse the policy if you like. But if you don't collapse the policy, you still have life insurance. So it's very important that your carrier, whichever carrier you have your policy with, that you understand what your policy entails. Some carriers don't allow you to take portions of it and leave the balance. Some carriers do. That's a very important concern. Let's say that there's an experimental treatment in Thailand or in Australia or in Europe somewhere. Well, if your policy, for this example, a $1 million policy that we looked at, or so the case may be, let's say you want to pull $50,000 or $500,000. You want to go get a chalet somewhere in Europe while you're recuperating and taking your treatments. Go ahead and do it. You got the other $500,000 of the policy value still remaining, because as long as you have the policy in force, it's a policy in force. It doesn't get canceled just because you took some of the benefit. However, if you take the money from your 401k, it's gone. You can't replenish the 401k unless you have the cash to put back into it to make up for the lost time. And that's only if your employer allows, or the plan that your employer has purchased allows the ability for you to replant or supplant the money you've taken out. Then retirement income. Well, with a 401k, whatever's left over after tax distribution, that's the money. It doesn't continue to grow once you have decided to withdraw your money. Whereas with a index universal life policy, the typical index universal life policy will give you almost 300% more income than a regular 401k, because the funds are guaranteed tax-free, and the IULs that our office tends to offer to our clients have the ability to distribute funds or lifetime income until the day you die. And there are many different options you have out there, but it's going to continue growing, and it's going to continue to give you income. So you're not going to ever run out of money. Now, the value and the policies, the amount, the determination of the values, they're all based and predicated on your choices, but you get the ability to make those choices. Emergencies are available with the index universal life. You can pull cash just like you could if you had a disability or an illness. But if you do an emergency liquidation in your 401k, you've got that tax penalty that's automatic, and it's not immediately liquid. You've got to wait for them to contribute and get the money to you. Far longer than if you call up the insurance company and say, I need a distribution for my policy, where they can overnight you the check if necessary. Likewise, there are returns more than 18 years or however long you have in life. Our policies that we typically use are valid up through age 120. So that's a very big difference than when your 401k money's typically lasts between 12 to 18 years at the time that you retire. So
our companies are up to 121 too, Howard.
Yes, absolutely. So there are many concerns you want to look at, but these are just some of the initial ones you want to look at. Now, this next slide is a chart that gives you some of the basic information about the benefits of having an IUL versus whether or not those same things are available in a 401k. There's a guaranteed minimum return in an IUL. Well, every insurance policy sold in the United States is required to provide you with what's called an illustration. And in that illustration, there are specific elements of information that the federal government says you must disclose to the consumer. And every index universal life policy or every life insurance policy in the United States has a guaranteed minimum return. That's required in order to meet the requirements of the code. There's guaranteed life income available with IUL. It's not available with a 401k. Tax-free death benefits, lump sum payments are available with an IUL, not with a 401k. 401ks, got to pay your taxes because you put your money in and deferred your tax. Deferred doesn't mean dissolved. It means you have to pay them later. Critical illness, disability, or chronic illness are all available with an IUL. It's not with a 401k. You're limited to whatever the value of your 401k is. And downside protection against market loss, the IUL protects you when the market falls. The 401ks do not. Here's a chart that gives you the performance of the typical IUL versus a mutual fund or a stock 401k. Now, two caveats to this slide that are very, very important. One, this IUL is illustrating a cap rate of 0 to 9%. That's an illustrated purpose only. Every IUL that's out there can have a different cap or floor. Those are terms that can be complicated or confusing, but rather than confuse you, I'm just using an average of 0 to 9% for this illustration purpose. Many of the policies out there, for example, will have a cap that you'll be informed, oh, our cap is 15 or 20%, but then they'll tell you, if you read a little further, that the floor is 5, 6, 9, or 10%. Well, that means if the market values that this plan that you have is predicated upon doesn't earn over that floor amount, your earnings are 0. So it's important to know what those numbers are. But I use 0 to 9% for this table solely because it will show what happens in the market based on a 9% cap up to 9%. So if you look here in 1999, for example, on this chart, the S&P's point to point, which means from the beginning of the period to the end of the period, the growth average was 19.5% in 1999. Well, the IUL, you'll see, only gave you a 9% of growth, right? So you'll see that the IUL at $100,000, you got $9,000 in added value to your policy. Now, let's look at 2000. If you recall, in 2000, there were market losses over the year. So in 2000, the market here lost 10.14%, but the IUL was locked into place and there's no loss because your floor is 0. You can never lose money with an index universal life policy, because if it does, then it violates the rules required for that policy and it's not a valid product. So that's a very, very important thing for you to pay attention to. And statements are issued annually, so it's easy for you to verify what the data is. Now let's look at 2002. It was a 23.37% market loss. If you had your $100,000, that $100,000 you notice in the table, the value dropped to $71,575. That's your cash that disappeared. Whereas with the IUL, you're still sitting at $109,000 of value credit to your policy because your values were locked in, and if the market lost, you didn't. But let's look to down to near the end of the table. The values for 2019 are actual values. 2020 is estimated because the numbers had not been finalized at the time this table was created. However, in 2019, the market gained 28.8%. So from 1999 all the way through 2019, and including the estimates for 2020, the average rate of return and the value of your money after tax with your mutual fund or your 401k, you'll notice the tax rate being an average of 30%, assuming that you are making $100,000 a year in salary. After taxes, you're actually gaining 83.96%. So your value is $183,960.84. But if you look to the IUL, every year that the market gained, you gained. You never lost value in your policy. So that at the end, with your tax-free growth, you had 199% growth on your money. Now, would you rather have 83.9% growth on your money or 199% growth on your money? Now, these are estimates and averages. Of course, no one can guarantee the numbers, but this is an illustration, that example that shows you where even with the market swings at various rates, depending on the broker and depending on the stock you use, and 401ks typically are managed by a management portfolio or the firm that you have your 401k with. They determine where in the market your money is for your 401k, not you. And based on those decisions of the average broker, these are what the numbers are. And they are very, very, very important to pay attention to. So this next slide was a quote from a Forbes article, which was the 401k Rethink. And this was from September of 2009. So you'll notice both of these articles are from 2009. I'm sure there are thousands of articles out there now that still talk about the 401k, but there hasn't been a huge change in the tax programs for 401ks, other than some of them allow you to put a little more money in, some of them allow you to put less, but the bottom line is still the same. Once you're in a 401k, there's no cap or limit on how much the plan can skim off the top with regard to fees, costs, or management fees. And many of those plans, especially those sold to small companies, meaning employees 100 to 50 or less employees, they can eat up roughly half of your investment return. For example, if you've got a 401k and your management fees or costs are roughly 5 to 6%, well, if your management costs are 5 to 6%, and you'll notice when we look back at this chart, well, look at 2007. Well, the market gained 3.53%. If your management fee is 5%, even though the market still gained, did you gain or lose money that year? Likewise, if the market showed, for example, in the year, let's go over here and look at this other year. Let's say the market in 2004, the market gained 8.99%. But if your management fees are up to 5%, how much did you actually earn? You're looking at 4%. And if the same money was in an IUL at 8.99%, you'd have gained 8.99%. So those are huge concerns that everyone should pay attention to. So what does this do in terms of an example of, well, how does this affect me? Well, let's compare a 30-year-old valuable client that has a 401k plan where they're paying in roughly $500 a month for their 401k. I don't know what your income level is, but for this individual who's 33 years old, he's putting $500 per month into his 401k. And if he gets paid bi-weekly or bi-weekly, that's $250 from every paycheck going to his 401k. Think about your own 401k if you have one. Think about how much you're putting in every month. If it's more than the $250 per pay period, then in your head, calculate for you whatever that number would be higher than what this one is. If it's less than that, then of course it's going to be a lower number. But in this example, we're comparing a $400 a month index universal life plan versus a $500 a month 401k. For this same 33-year-old, if in this illustration is just the $400 a month per month 401k, IUL. They could have both an IUL and put $100 a month into their 401k. But let's look at what the numbers show. Well, if you contribute to the plan all the way through age 67, so that's 33 years old plus another 34 years to get to 67 years old. So at 67 years old in the 401k, there's no initial death benefit. You'll see here, number is 0. Now, in your nest egg, the money you put away at $500 per month, assuming that you had an actual growth rate in your 401k that was assumed that you got the estimated values based over the last 34 years, using the average market return, your nest egg is now about $660,000, almost $661,000. 6% actual growth rate, 4% on your withdrawals, and your stuff is at market risk. So we're assuming that the market went well and you still earned your money. Well, your retirement age at 68, you're going to get roughly $26,424 per year before taxes. But if you are, taking care of the projected legacy benefit through age 88, you will have earned $264,243 before taxes. Now that's just taking the 26,424 for 20 years. Now, if you look down the chart, looking at the non-qualified IUL at $400 a month, with an average crediting rate of 7.5%. Now, the table we looked at before was a 9% cap, but we're estimating the average rate of return at 7.5%. It's not at market risk, and you do have long-term protections. So that IUL plan, you're looking at $525,307. So you've put in less because it was only $400 a month, not $500, and you're looking at $54,125 every year, tax-free. And at the end, at age 88, presuming you're not demised, at age 88, you've taken $511,000. Well, which would you rather have? $511,000, almost $512,000 tax-free, or $264,000 that you still got to pay Uncle Sam? Now, I don't know what your tax level is, but let's assume that, you've got your Social Security money, you have your 401k money, and if you have any other retirement funds money that you've got coming in, which is considered to be taxable income, say, I don't know, other investments or property or return on investments from dividends or stocks, well, your tax bracket is going to be a little higher than when you were 20 years old or 30 years old when you put the money in. So these are concerns that many of us have not thought about, but everyone should. Likewise, here's a 40-year-old. Well, I'm 40. I'm not 33. I'm 40. What do I do for me? Okay, let's look at the same thing. A mutual fund that you're putting money into that's in the market, at a 6% yearly return. And this is before your capital gains taxes, of course. It's got market risk to it as well, but assume that, this table gives you the values at $300 a month, $500 a month, $800 a month, even up to $1,000 a month. These are what they're talking about. Now, likewise, if you look on the right side of this chart, this assumes that you're putting in, non-qualified plan with an IUL and your tax-free money. Well, it's $21,102 in the non-qualified plan that's tax-free, but there's also a $289,000 death benefit. Well, you'll notice there's no death benefit with the 401k plan. Well, the IUL comes with a death benefit, assuming that this person qualified for their insurance. Well, let's look at $500 a month. Well, this is $37,000, almost $38,000 a year, with a $488,000 death benefit. This is a death benefit. So something happens to you along this journey in life. Guess what? Critical illness, chronic illness, terminal injuries. You can still draw this cash. Not all of it, but you can draw a large portion of this cash. And you can't do that with a 401k without paying the tax penalties. These are very, very, very important factors to pay attention to. Well, what happens if I'm older? Well, I'm a 56-year-old individual. Okay, great. So you're 56 years old. You waited till later in life, which means you'll need to put more money in to catch up to that 33-year-old. So I'm able to put in $5,000 per quarter because, well, I waited. I put my kids through college. I paid off my mortgage. I did these other things that I take care of my family. Well, now I'm an executive. My salary has gone up. Well, because of my salary rise, I'm no longer eligible for things like a Roth IRA because I make too much income and I exceed the Roth cap, so I'm not eligible for that. Well, what can I do? Well, $5,000 per quarter, that's $20,000 a year death plan that you're putting into your 401k. If you take the same money and put it into an executive IUL, well, let's do the comparison. Well, year one, if something happens to you, your death benefit from your 401k is only what you paid in. That's $20,000. And you'll see right here on the table, it's only $20,000. But If you have an executive IUL, the death benefit is the face value of the policy, which is $321,991, because it's an executive IUL, and you've paid $20,000 in it in the first year for that policy. Now, assuming that you don't pass away, you hit 70 years old. What's your income on your 401k plan at 70? It's roughly $16,000. At the end of the time, assuming that you're still collecting the money through more years, it's about $400,000 of value when you hit 70 years old. But your legacy of value is at 90 years old, you have no money left over. It's gone. Because when you hit your retirement age, you start drawing down from your principal in your 401k, and it doesn't replenish. It's gone. It goes away, because you're not going to grow in that 401k anywhere near what you need to be able to maintain your lifestyle. Whereas with the executive IUL, it's $35,000 a year, almost $36,000, tax-free. And your legacy at age 90, it's $111,000. So these are things and considerations that everyone should consider, but not everyone does. And we want to make sure we educate our clients about the difference. So when we look at the main chart, oops, excuse me. Yetti, I'm having troubles with my slide.
Escape. I think that's the last slide. Yeah, that's the last.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point of it, that it goes back to the same thing. It's not unusual for us to find these plans, but that's the ugly truth about the 401ks. Once you get into the period where you are taking care of your family and the considerations that you need to make, the real question becomes whether or not the plan that you've decided meets your needs. And if it doesn't, give us a call. We can certainly try to help you find the plan that works for your family to meet the financial needs and goals you have. Your goals are very important. Have you considered, for that 33-year-old, his goals are going to be very different than the 56-year-old, just like the 40-year-old is going to be different than either the 33-year-old or the 56-year-old. You know, if you're starting out, you got a brand new family, have you thought about the children's college expenses? What about the lifestyle of paying for the house? Have you protected the income if something happens to you to cover the vehicles, the home, the financial lifestyle and well-being that your family is enjoying today? These are considerations that I'm sure you've seen through with your clients over and over. Am I correct, Yetti?
Absolutely, Howard. You really beautifully presented this financial charts and graphs, because as a human being, you know, the life event, we live too long sometimes. We probably die unexpectedly too soon, or we become ill. So it covers all of it in the cash value. Anyone who owns this product, IUL or whole life with cash value, they can withdraw money. I mean, you know, they can take money on a loan provision if they don't want to, you know, have a tax implication. So learn and understand, you know, the consequences before you take action. That's basically what we're preaching here in this presentation. I mean, every Thursday, and then, you know, in other presentations, wherever we're invited to present financial literacy presentation. So I'm sure, you know, what we have presented, or what Attorney Howard presented today, you know, have some question in your mind. You need more explanation, definitely, because it is, you know, it is a little bit overwhelming sometimes for people who have never heard of it. So we're always here. And if you want to contact Attorney Howard Helly, his contact number is 202-810-6329. And your email address, Howard?
Haleyfirm@gmail.com. That's HALEYFIRM@gmail.com. That's my legal office. My insurance office is advancedlifegoals@gmail.com. No spaces, all together, one word, advanced life goals. Because, you know, a lot of times, you know, I run into this a lot, and we've mentioned this before. Many people think of life insurance, and the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, I must die. And so it's a very difficult subject for folks to think about. But I want to remind folks that the goal is to educate people to understand that you should look at this as not a death policy, but a life value. It's adding value to the life while you're living. And that's the difference. The living benefits are tremendous. And many people don't understand what an IUL is, how it actually operates. But there are a lot of brokers that people speak to, and they're insurance brokers who are either don't have an IUL available, a product available for them. So because they don't have one, they discourage the client from looking at one, or because they're uneducated about what an IUL actually is and how it operates. So they have a hesitancy to discuss it with their clients. We recommend, and we tell clients all the time, talk to your insurance broker. If they don't have an IUL and can't explain to you what it is or how it works, give us a call. Bring your policy to our office. We'll compare the policy you have with the policy we have available for you, and you can determine whether or not they're the same or whether or not they're different, because they're all different. IULs are not all the same, and they're not all constructed the same way. Some have caps that are higher, but the floors are much higher. Some have costs that are greater than 1%. Some have costs that are less than 0.5%. But unless you look to the policy and see what they are, there's no way of knowing. And you need to know, because these are the critical differences that we want to make sure people are aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in this kind of product, in the financial product, comparing it, understanding it, learn how it functions, and as Howard said, the cost involved in it, is
Yes.
something that we should really understand and know before we, sign up any kind of contract or decided to move forward. So it is a really, really a pleasure, Howard, to work with such a professional,
Well, thank you.
qualified financial advisor, honestly, because I love to explain everything, from start to end. So people will be an advocate and will understand what they have, because, I've seen many people, they have the policy, but they have never opened it and they don't even know it. They just take it and kept it in a folder. So we don't want that, because we don't want you to be surprised at the end of the day.
Right.
You need the money the most, whether you become ill or whether we die. I mean, any of the live event happens, we just have to know exactly what is ahead, what is waiting for us with
Yes.
this policy. So knowledge is power, as always, but to have such a professional, knowledgeable person like Attorney Howard is also really needed, I mean, in our
Thank you.
community. So
Thank you.
thank you so much, Howard, for being with me in this program. And I hope the viewers find this information very powerful and valuable. Until we see you next Thursday, you all have a wonderful day. And thank you so much, Howard. Have a wonderful
Thank
day.
you. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.